I always loved creepypasta. These terrifying stories would sometimes keep me awake at night and fill me with a horror that movies just don't. Movies are all jump scares now. They just don't do it for me. That being said, I do have problems with creepypasta when they're based on actual businesses and companies. Lost episodes that are made by angry animators, fast food chains, and real-life charities actually being horrible science experiments. It's almost pitifully cynical, really. What really irks me more than anything are some of the ridiculous lengths people will go to when they try to make Disney be the bad guy. Hidden tunnels below the parks where they torture those who try to stay after hours. Disney taking over the world through the power of belief magic. Don't get me wrong. I understand that Disney is a large corporation with its fingers in many pies, but I enjoy the parks and the movies. It seems insulting that people would paint Disney in a malicious light, at least any more than any critique of big business. It's even more insulting that they think that adding the date of Walt's death or messing with some colors makes Disney seem like a supernatural force in itself. It's not scary, it's insulting to the reader. The story I'm about to tell you is not one such insulting tale. This is from when I worked as a security guard at Disneyland Resort. Let me tell you a bit more about myself. My name is Elijah Allen. I've always been a huge Disney fan for most of my life. I've been to all the US parks multiple times, and living in California, I even have an annual pass. I took entire college courses on Disney and Disneyland, and owned entire bookshelves of books about the logistics of the park and the rides. When I got a job as a security guard at Disneyland, I was overjoyed. It was just after college and I was looking for any job. Nowhere I wanted to go was even accepting of my degree. It didn't help that I was in a part of California that was one of the worst places to get a job in the country. Even after getting a guard license and everything, I couldn't find a guard job anywhere. So when Disney hired me, it was a blessing to both have a job and work for a place I loved. It was an easy job, honestly. Mostly it was just being a smiling face who kept an eye around the park. If you were unlucky, you would have to be on search duty in the front of the parks. But otherwise, it was just dealing with the occasional person who had too much to drink in California Adventure. There were a few bigger incidents, like pickpockets or basically anything that happened on grad night, but it was a surprisingly chill job. Night security was the rarest job, since the parks were essentially empty from an hour after closing to an hour before opening. The graveyard shift was minimally staffed. You basically double-checked the cams as you did a full lights-on search of each attraction, just to make sure nobody snuck out of a ride car and hid, and then just occasionally wandered the backlot area to look for possible break-ins. The shifts and rotations were fairly even, with only slight biases for seniority for best shifts and best spots. I wasn't stuck on night shift every night, but I had it more often than not. It was one of those nights that the incident in question happened. I was in California Adventure that night, working in the Hollywood area of the park. I had just done a full sweep of the Hyperion Theater there, where they show Frozen with one of the other guards. We split up from there, and I headed off to the back lot behind Mission Breakout, while he looked around inside the lobby. Behind the ride, there was a large parking lot, but there were also a few warehouses for storage of seasonal items or discarded ride parts that haven't been recycled. There was an incident I heard about where someone tried to break into the warehouse to steal ride memorabilia. Some fans do crazy things. Either way, the man upstairs made sure the guards checked and double-checked the warehouses just in case someone tried to steal something again. It was my turn tonight, and my first turn even investigating the warehouses. I strode across the parking lot, flashlight in hand. As I approached, I felt a sense of dread. I shook it off, though, assuming it was just the usual anxiety of every person who ever walked through a near-empty parking lot at night. I walked to the warehouse and started to jiggle each handle, confirming that each door was locked. What was an issue was that I was hearing noises inside of the warehouse. It should be empty. Why was I hearing movement? I grabbed my walkie-talkie to talk to the guard at the main office. "Hey, I'm at Warehouse 3, behind Mission Breakout. Is anyone supposed to be working back here tonight? Looks like one of the ride technicians didn't clock out. He might be working overtime, but it might be best to check it out just in case. Keep an eye out for Carl then." "Roger that. I'll report back in a minute." Before I discuss what was inside of the warehouse, I should first tell you about one of the worst Disney rides known to man. It was here at California Adventure on opening day, but closed almost a year later. This short-lived attraction was called Superstar Limo. The idea of the ride was that you were a celebrity being picked up in a stretch limo for your big premiere, only to turn into a roller coaster as you were being chased by the paparazzi. The problem was that international news made being chased by the paparazzi passé. The ride slowed down, and humor was installed to replace it. Unfortunately, a lot of the jokes were only hits to those who lived in California. On top of that, they shoved a couple stars who weren't at the height of their fame into the ride, but made the animatronics look like caricatures, if anything. The ride was shut down and was replaced a few years later with a Monsters, Inc. based ride. The track was the same, the limos were repainted as taxis, but all the set dressings were removed and tossed into a warehouse, waiting to somehow be reused or trashed. It was this warehouse that I walked into that night. I flicked on the mag light and for a moment wished that Disney security was allowed to carry weapons. I flicked on the mag light and for a moment wished that Disney security was allowed to carry weapons. Either way, this flashlight was what I had, and it illuminated the darkness of the warehouse surprisingly well. I turned and started to flick on the breakers for the main lights, but they weren't working for some reason. I should have waited for backup, but I stupidly continued walking in. I followed the sounds of movement, moving slow, calling out to whoever it was, and asking if it was Carl. I still wasn't sure how they got in, since the doors were locked. I turned a corner into the workshop, and suddenly a smell hit me. It was a horrible smell. I can only describe it as wet decay. It was like stagnant water next to something that had died. I stepped further in, and I saw in the corner of the workshop a pool of blood. In this dark corner, the movement continued. I had to know what it was. I continued each step, practically echoing in the warehouse. Come out now, you are on private property owned by Disney. I cut myself off with a gasp as rats ran out of the corner. They ran past me and scurried away, and I breathed a sigh of relief. They were the movement, surprisingly loud for rats, but at least there was nothing else alive in the warehouse. The blood was still concerning, so I once again started to radio in. Alright, the noise I heard was just some rats. There's a pool of blood here though, I'm going to take a closer. As I stopped, I noticed some movement behind me, and I turned to look at it. There, standing in the doorway, was the terrifying caricature of Drew Carey. That cartoonish grin with that garish shirt was easy to recognize, though the creature's various joints seemed cracked, as though it had been given mobility beyond its usual means. The hands were stained with blood, and I could see a horrible evil in its eyes. This thing wanted to kill me. You think the points are the only thing that doesn't matter? It said in a creepy voice. It sounded like Drew's actual voice, but horrible, distorted, and pitched weird to the point it was barely unrecognizable. Well, you're wrong, it laughed at me. Your life also doesn't matter. With that, it rushed towards me at an impossible speed, and its hands wrapped around my neck. I could feel it getting harder to breathe, and the life was leaving my body. I was going to die in this warehouse. I had to try to survive, so I did what I could. I swung the mag light down on the animatronic's head, each swing cracking that plastic facade. I could see the metal underneath, but the thing kept on squeezing. I swung with what I thought might be my dying breath, and I could feel myself ready to pass out. Before I blacked out, I heard my partner's voice and saw a light in the corner of my eye. I felt my body fall to the floor and blacked out. I woke up in the hospital later that morning. I was found by my partner, who quickly called for an ambulance. I had severe bruising on my neck, and it was near impossible to speak at first, but I would live. I wrote down my report, and they explained to me what had happened from the outside. I went in to investigate, and when my partner found me, I was unconscious on the workshop floor. They even thought I was dead at first, considering the blood. It turns out that blood came from Carl, the missing ride technician. He had been murdered, his throat ripped out. Disney did no work to cover it up, since there was clear evidence of an outside party performing a break-in. The intruder wasn't caught, but the Drew Carey animatronic had disappeared. It was found in the haunted mansion over at the main Disneyland park. From what I've heard through the grapevine, the technicians found that the mechanics had been tampered with. As for me, I kept my job. They didn't even cut my pay since I had done the job by the book. These things happened, and the fact that I was in the hospital showed I put my life on the line for the company. Nothing extreme happened to me since then. Nothing has attacked me beyond the occasional belligerent drunk, and I have had no more scary experiences like this. The rookies I've talked to haven't been attacked or had spooky experiences in the warehouses like mine. I sometimes wonder if I was special somehow. You may be wondering why I'm telling you this story. The status quo was maintained, and in the end, this was just a random spooky story, right? Unfortunately, that's not entirely true. Recently, a search through the warehouse again found that the Tim Allen animatronic had gone missing. It is still nowhere to be found. That's why I'm writing you, Aurora. I can't post this on the Creepypasta wiki, because they'll call it a fake. I know that you'll be able to see the truth in this. You need to spread the word. There is an evil outsider changing and corrupting these creations, and it must be stopped.